everybody. Um, as Ivana mentioned, the class is recorded tonight, and so if you're interested in watching the replay, which I recommend doing for the projects, the replay will be on michaels.com/classes, and you just scroll down and find the circle link for jewelry classes, and it'll make it easier to find this recording. It's in order most recent, so it should be up within 48 hours to watch. Okay, and so I wanted to just say a few things about the project before getting started. This is one of those ones that could be considered somewhat intermediate. I think it's completely approachable for beginners to try this project as well. But my recommendation was with all of these classes, because we're trying to put so much information out there in just 1 hour, that it sometimes helps just to watch the demonstration. And then there's a really great handout that is downloadable from the website, and you can review the steps there. And then, you know, when the replay is out, you can pause and work along with that. But what I'm going to try to do for today's class is I'm going to try to cover all three designs. This is the first one I'm holding up. And I'm going to go slowly, and I'm going to try to repeat what I can. But I want to make sure there's time to cover everything and show you guys all the, you know, the ideas. And my goal for this class and all the classes really is to just throw a spark out there. And so you'll see, oh, that's really great. I like that technique. I'm going to try that with my own idea. And you'll find lots of new ideas will come up just while you're working. And so the one I just pulled up was size 8 seed beads on the ball chain. And then I was kind of playing with, you know, the seed bead wall, or sorry, the strung bead wall at Michael's. And I found these 2-hole tiles. And this was a really easy design. This is a fast design. You can make this in 15 minutes, and it's just brick stitched onto the ball chain directly. And then I got creative, and I wanted to make something with an elegance, and the ball chain gives it kind of a little bit of casual element to a really elegant piece. And so for this one, we're going to play with super duos, size 10 seed beads, and there's a check glass drop here. But I'm going to show you guys when we get to that spot how you could replace that with a charm or an 8mm bead, like a gemstone bead. I just posted on my page today, the one I finished right before class to get warmed up has an 8mm polymer clay bead, and we're going to share the link for that when I get to it. So without further ado, let me switch my camera and give you guys a close-up view of each of the projects. There's project 1, which is just size 8 seed beads. And this one's project 2, and that's with the 2-hole tiles. And then here's the super duo with the drop. And I want to show you guys one more. This one I just made. I really just made it an hour ago. And I was having a lot of fun with it. It's the same design as this one here on my right. So I think that's still your guys' right. But this one made with an 8mm bead instead of the drop. So totally your preference, what you'd like to do with your design. But hopefully after today, you'll be rolling with brick stitch on different types of chain, and you'll have some new ideas from today. So I'm starting with ball chain, and what this is it's just the, you know, the regular size ball chain you see out there, and they come in sets of 3. So you'll get a gold one and 2 silver ones. But if you wanted to use leather, snake chain, it will also work. This doesn't have to be on ball chain. I just like the look, so that's why I went with ball chain. The stitch is going to be made with a .006 wildfire, and I'm using the color black. And the beads. So starting with design 1, I'm going to work with some bright colors so that you guys can see the layers. These are size 8 seed beads. And when I get to the next design, I'm going to see if I can get that focus going here. Let's see, that looks like a little better. Okay. And when I get to the next designs, I'll show you guys the next seed bead line up for those, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with this one. So in the handout, it'll say 40 inches of thread for this design. And if you're making the full fan, let me show this again, you'll want to have about that much, because the way it's constructed is you're going to go through it 4 times. And so you will need most of those 40 inches of thread. I'm going to make a mini version of this now, just for time. And it's going to be about that big. So you can see all the steps for having to tie it off and everything. So, oh, and one more thing I wanted to say about measuring. So the first thing I'm going to show you when I get started is tying the thread onto the ball chain. Well, where do I tie it? You'll need to identify your center point. And so that's what I've done here. And then each of the designs in the handout will tell you from where on the center point to move up and tie off on. For my design today, I'm only going to go up about 3/4 of an inch because I want to be able to work it quickly. But on the example design, it was bigger. It was saying to use 4.5 inches. So this is a pretty good one. But don't get too worried about whether or not you've found the exact center point and you're starting at the exact spot on the ball chain. And I want to show you why. So when I made this one, I wasn't sure how long this section was going to be. And so it's not perfectly centered. See, I've got this over. No one's ever going to notice that. Don't worry about it. You know, get it kind of generally in the center, stitch, and it'll look great. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just kind of going to guesstimate what about a, you know, almost just under 2 inches would look like from a center point here. Get the keyboard out of the way there. And so I'm using precision scissors just to cut thread. And on this design, I'm using size 10 beading needles. You can also use 12. When we get to the super duos, it can be helpful to use the 12s, but I'm using size 10 right now for this design. And a trick to threading it is to take a pair of chain nose pliers and flatten the end of your thread to get it through. And pull it down about 7 inches or so. This is worked on a single strand. So there are my needles threaded. I found my center point here. I'll bring that into the camera view. Okay, here's my center point. And I'm going to attach my thread at about here, I think. Okay, so I'm going to tie a double knot. There's 1 and 2. And I'm going to start with, this is an opaque turquoise, size 8 seed bead. And so everyone's got a different style for brick stitch. I have a method that I like to use, and I just pick up 1 bead to start. And then I like to bring the tail thread through that bead. And then pull the thread, the working thread and the tail thread apart. And so whatever's left remnant of that knot will go inside the bead. On this chain, it does tend to stay on the actual ball chain unless you do that step. And then when you do that step, it brings the knot off of the bar in between the 2 parts of the ball chain, and then brings it up into the bead. So it's a handy step I recommend adding, you know, to your toolkit. And now I'm just identifying again which side is the one I came up high on. So that's going to be this side. Okay. So I've got the 1 bead on. I'm going to pick up another bead, go under the ball chain, And if it helps, you can just kind of hold the thread with your finger or thumb. I'm going under the ball chain. And now I'm going to bring the thread over the ball chain and through the bead. So needling through. And I'm going in the direction that, the opposite direction that we just went through that bead. So down. And another trick to look at with the first few beads when you're adding them, getting them to sit next to each other. This is where the ball chain is kind of cool. I'm going to make sure that this loop is positioned in the next gap on the chain here. And there you go. I'm just locked right in position there. So that's step one. I'm going to build a few more. I'm adding this one. And another idea is to place the needle kind of over that next gap. That also helps too. There's 3 on. When I start working quickly with ball chain, sometimes I'll pick up the piece like this and hold it between my thumb and forefinger and pointer finger and put the needle underneath. See that spot? And I'm just kind of pinching it to make it stay. This is how you can work fast, kind of working at speed there. If you hold it, it doesn't help if you're teaching for people to see what you're doing, but that's, I wanted to share the placement there so it can help you if you're working at home. And so working this one so you guys can see it. Okay, and then coming on the front. So I went behind the ball chain with my needle. Now I'm coming over the ball chain and back up through the bead. So this basic concept here of just stitching on this like it was a component, it's the whole starting point for all of these designs. Because you'll start with this, size 8 one. You'll think, well, wow, what if I try with size 60 beads? That would work. Or try some 10s and try some, some check glass rounds, rondelles. Anything will work. Anything that you'd like to try. And for spacing, the beads will sit next to each other. So when you're brick stitching, no matter what size bead you're using, when you add it, they will sit next to each other. And if you're working with ball chain and you have something that's too wide, just space it to the next one. It'll work great. Let me get a few more on here so I can show you the next step. And in the pattern, I think there's about 21 of these. I would put 21 pairs. So in the next step we're going to do after this is we're going to add a herringbone stitch layer. And in herringbone stitch, you need an even number of beads. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm adding even number. And you'd call each pair a column. And the design one in our handout has 21 columns. So here I've got 1, 2, 3, that's 4 columns. I'll probably go for 5 columns. So that means I need to put 2 more beads on. Okay, last one. Okay, so that is step 1. And I'm going to switch colors now. In the handout project, this next row is repeated with the same color. For this one, I'm going to switch just so we can tell our rows apart. And so the next step here is to pick up 2 size 8 seed beads and go down through that second bead. And so a lot of you will recognize this as herringbone stitch, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And then come up through the next size 8 bead. So in this direction. I really love red with turquoise. The color is so pretty. Oh, and this color, I should tell you what this is. It's a cinnabar red. It really does look like cinnabar color. And so I picked up 2, and I'm coming down through the next size 8 bead here. Oops, I caught a strand over here. One second, I'm gonna get untangled. Oh no. There we go. Okay. And then come up through the next bead. See how easy this is? It's really, really easy. It's just 2 basic, beading techniques. And they're both ones that we've done on other classes, so it's just how versatile all these stitches really are. It's really fun to see what other designers come up with. Okay, so there's one more. And I wanted to show you guys one more thing. Oh, I went through the wrong one. Sorry about that. I was supposed to go through this bead, but I went through. Oops. Okay. The last bead. There we go. Okay, so when you come down through the last bead, you're going to need to turn around to go the other direction. So to do that, just use the ball chain again. Just circle around it. I'm actually putting my needle behind it right now, and then coming up through both beads. And just ignoring that tail thread for the moment. This is the tail thread here. Okay, I'm gonna switch colors again. And so row 3, it's the same way, but with row 3, you'll start to notice the curve forming. So with every stitch you add in herringbone, you end up with this kind of fanning thing that happens. And you'll notice it a lot more on a piece that's wider. The piece that I'm working right now is small, just so I can show you guys every layer. But on this one, that curve starts to form at this step. When you're adding row 3, the curve will become really pronounced. And it holds its own shape like that. But even on a piece this small, you'll start to see it. So I'm coming down through the next bead. And with herringbone, I like to help them sit side by side. I think it makes the tension good. Because when they're stacked, you're using more thread in between each bead versus if they're side by side like that. And so coming up through that red bead, that's my row 2 bead. Picking up 2 of my size 8s, coming down to the next one. I'm going to help that one sit side by side. And coming up through that last column here. Okay. And so to turn around here, again, we're going to need somewhere to turn around. You can come down through this blue bead, which is your row 1 bead, go around the ball chain and come back up. And that might be what I'll do here. But another trick you could do is you can use the thread bridge that's in between both of those 2 blue beads as a way to turn. To do that, you just go through it. And then come back up through the red bead and the yellow bead. So what I did is I used the thread bridge between these two as a way to hook and turn. But you could also just go down through all these, go around the ball chain and come back up. Whichever way works for you is great. Okay, so the last row, and I'm adding that. We've done 3 rows so far. And so I'm going to add another row on top of it. And this time I'm going to do something different with where I stitch down. So normally in herringbone stitch, the next row, you do what we've been doing. You'd go down through this bead, the yellow one, and then come up through the next yellow. But on this piece that curves like this, you really want it to fan. And if you had a connection between these 2 beads, it wouldn't fan as much. So we're going to go down into the next row and then turn so that you get that fan. And so to do that, just pick up 2 new beads, still size 8, and go through the yellow and the red beads. So through the last 2 rows. Pull tight and make those sit. And then turn and come up through the 2 8s that are next to it. And then, yeah, just keep going with the next one. Again, going through both of those. Up through the next 2. And now this little piece here is also, it's starting to do that fan. Especially if you pull tight. It's automatically just moving those apart like that. Going down through the next 2. And the last one. Okay, and so for this last step, I went through all the beads, all 3 of those. And I'm going to loop around the ball chain again. And this is the last row, so it's just weaving in now. So to weave in, I'm going to turn the piece over. I went behind the ball chain. I'm going to come back up through. I just went through the red, so row 2. And just weaving in now. To weave in, all you got to do is follow the thread path through a few beads, just like you were stitching it, just like you stitched it in the beginning. And that is usually enough to lock the thread. I'm just going to show that really quick with the working thread, and you would need to do the same thing with the tail thread that's left here. See, I'm just weaving back through, give my thread somewhere to change direction by going down here. And I'm going to go through this bead, down, go behind the ball chain and come up through however many beads I can get through. So it looks like I'm going to get through those 3. And so weaving in, you can go anywhere you'd like. Just I use that loop around the ball chain there to be my change of direction, which makes thread, you know, stay put when you trim it. So I'm gonna trim this one here by pushing down with the scissors, pulling up with the thread. Oops, sorry about that. A little overzealous with pulling on the thread. Okay, just putting tension on it so that the thread can disappear into the work. So I would repeat that. I would put a needle on this tail, weave it in the same way, maybe going down around the ball chain at a different beading point. But there it is. That's an abbreviated version of this big one. And that is all there is to it. And so now you guys are thinking, well, what about other beads? That's the first thing that happened to me when I was making these at home for the class. And I was just going to stop there, you know, I was just going to stop with this because how gorgeous is that? And that would be a great class. But then I got distracted by more beads. It's known to happen. And I saw these on the strung bead wall. And the part numbers for all of these beads, they're in the handout. So you'll be able to find them. And I thought, what if? Well, what if we put these on ball chain? So this is left over from my other strand. It actually comes with 2 strands on it. So these are my leftovers that I'm grabbing. I'm going to get some more ball chain. And so with these, I found that a row of size 10s and a row of 11s made them pop the most. So what I'm going to bring in first is I'm going to bring in some size 10. Let's see, where are my 10s? Bring in some size 10 yellows. What's that? Here's my ball chain. It's stuck on this card here, sorry guys. Okay. You get 3 of them, which is really great. So you can make each design. Okay. There's that. Starting with the 10s. And so for this one, you'll want to cut about 36 inches of thread if you're making the full length version. And the full length version, I think I used 10 tiles, was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 tiles. For the full length version, I had 9 tiles. I'm going to do a version with 5 right now so we can get through without you guys having to watch me stitch through a bunch of them. And the same thing as before, you just want to kind of identify your midpoint. And if you don't know in the handout, I have outlined how many inches it is from the center point for each of the designs that are featured. But let's say you didn't know that information and you were just designing your own. Here's how I did it. I just started playing, and it doesn't need to be exact. But I'm going to just choose that spot based on that layout. Okay, so I tied 1 knot. Now I'm going to tie a double knot. And the knot is sitting just in between 2 of the balls on the ball chain. And pull up. And so the first bead you'll add for this is the actual tile. And I don't think they have a front or a back, so it doesn't really matter which hole. Just go through whichever one. And I'm still doing my same trick where I try to bring the tail thread up through the first bead. So that's what I've done here. I'm just going to pull them apart. Okay, and so there's another hole in this tile bead. I need to go down through that hole under the ball chain. I'm going under the ball chain here. And I'm going to use my finger just to hold it on the bead mat so it stays put. Now turn and come over the ball chain and through that same hole of the tile bead. And then tighten it down. So there's tile 1. And the next step is to pick up another bead, but before you pick up the next tile, you'll need to pick up 3 size 10 seed beads. So 3 10s. And the way I discovered this and the way when I was working it was because they fan apart. the way to create that space for them to do that on a curve is to add those size 10 seed beads. And then come up through the same, I went behind the ball chain, sorry, behind the ball chain there. And then come up through the same hole. Don't go through the seed beads, just go through the tile. And then you'll want to guide the thread to sit in the next gap. And so it automatically does that little fan. And same as before, we're going to go down through the next hole of the tile, go behind the ball chain. And then come around it and above it and through the tile bead. There you go. Thinking about it. There we go. And that one just automatically locked into the next section for me without me really having to guide it. It'll start to do that for you too, especially when you start adding the next one and the next one. So I did the same thing again. I picked up 3 size 10s and I went through one side of the tile bead. I'm gonna go behind the ball chain here. And on around in the front of the ball chain and through the bead again, just like before. I'm guiding that one. There we go. I love this yellow with the turquoise too. Yellow, red, all those colors. We discovered they worked really nicely for the camera. And then I discovered I really liked them. Yeah, it's just really pretty. And so again, I'm doing the same thing. I picked up 3 10s and a tile bead. And I'm going to go behind the ball chain, or sorry, under the ball chain with the needle. And pull up. Going around the top of the ball chain through the tile bead only. And then just double checking where that loop is going to sit when I pull tight. And then next gap. There it is. So now just going down through the tile, behind the ball chain. And then coming up around the front of the ball chain through the tile. Let me see where this one, yeah, that one's gonna sit right where I want it to. Perfect, okay. I'm gonna add one more. Let's move a little faster on this one. 3 10s, tile. Around the ball chain, through the tile. And one more, just to lock it down. Going through that last hole, behind the ball chain, pull tight, over the ball chain and through the tile. Okay. And there we go. So now I want to do one more step, and that is to embellish it. Let me show you on the example. It'll be a little harder to see on this sample, but so my 10s were this gorgeous iris brown, but then in between each of those 10s is an 11, a little 11, kind of highlighting the picot to make them really pop. You could stop here if you like that just like it is, because that looks very cool. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how I made this one with the color you can see better. This one has a crystal, like a transparent crystal in there. I'm going to switch to red, and I'm using an 11, a size 11 in Cinnabar red. You don't need that many, just a few. And so now I need to get to where I'm headed through these beads. So to do that, I'm going to make a turn. I'm going down through the second hole of the tile. And I'm going to go around the ball chain again. I'm going to try to hook the same spot as the thread that's there. And I am flipping it over just so I can see where I'm going through this tile. Okay. And so now go through one of those 10s, just one of them. And look what happens when you put an 11 on the needle and then go through one more 10. I thought it was neat. It highlights that little picot. A picot is what these 3 beads together are called in bead weaving. And I'm going through the last size 10 with a new 11 on the needle. I don't know, I just thought that it added some visual interest to the piece. And it's a way to bring in another color. So if you like it, go for it. And if not, this looks great too. And so if you'll need to get to, once you've gone through that last 10, you'll need to get over here to this 10. And so to do that, same as what we did before, we're going to need to weave through. So I went down through the tile bead, around the ball chain, and then back up through the tile bead. Just through the tile, not through the seed beads. Pull tight. And then we're going to need to make one more turn. So going down through the tile, around the ball chain, and then back up through that same hole. And now I'm in position to add my 11s in between these. Okay, and I'll go through this one, and then I'm going to set this one aside and start the next one, because I'm hoping this one was, this was one of the easiest ones, I think. And we got about 20 minutes or so left of class. But what I would do here is I would go down through this tile, come around, go down through this hole, come up, same thing, add the 11s, move down, over, down. And that's just to get your thread in the right position. So I will finish this one a little bit later, but I know everyone was eager to see this one. I want to make sure I leave time for that. So starting with a new set of ball chain. And then you're going to need some super duo beads, and you'll need some size 10 seed beads to start. So move these 11s out of the way. I'll stick with the yellow. And here's some super duos. And so for this design, it's 36 inches of thread for this one as well. Still using the wildfire. And I am going to use, you can use a 10 or a 12. It's preference. If you like using a 12, go for it. If you have 10s handy, use those. Super duos, sometimes I find I'll use a 12, but if I don't have one, I'll make it work with a 10. And I threaded the needle, brought down about 7 inches, folded it over. This is another single strand design. And then for this one, you are going to want to, identify your center point like we did before, without getting too worried about, getting hung up on whether or not it's perfectly centered, because it's okay if it's off a little bit. But I'm looking at mine. I'm going to start it right there. The handout does have all the dimensions. You can measure from the center point up. In this case, it would be like 1.12 inches or so to get it perfectly centered. And the same as before, we're going to just tie a double knot with the end of the thread, leaving about, 7 to 10 inch tail for weaving in. That was my first knot. I'm going to tie one more knot. Okay, and So I'm looking at the clock here. We got 20 minutes. I think I can do this. I made one in 15 minutes earlier. This last one, so I know we can. All right, I've picked up on the needle one super duo bead. And before I do that next step, I want to show you guys the same thing I usually do with getting with the tail thread in the right spot first. It's easier to do when the bead is loose, so a good time to do that is now. This is my tail thread going through that same hole, using it to tighten. Okay, and so the next thing you'll want to do is turn and go through the next hole of the super duo and pick up one size 10 bead and go behind the ball chain. And then turn, and you'll want to come up through the size 10 bead and the super duo bead. And I went around the front of the ball chain there. So I was behind it, coming down, and in front of it, coming back up. And I'm going to tighten my tail thread to make sure the first bead is locked down. Okay, so there's the first one. And so to add the next one, we're going to do kind of similar to what we did before with the tiles. We're going to pick up 3 beads. Those are our transition beads to the next bead. So a new super duo bead. And then you'll want to come down with one more bead on there. So the way this is built is I kind of tapered it. I'm going to show you one example really quick. And of course the handout has this pattern outlined for you step by step, so you don't have to memorize this part. It comes up, we just came up through one size 10 through the super duo. We picked up 3. Here's the 3 size 10s. Coming down through the new super duo bead and picking up one more 10. And see how that's gonna sit right next to this one. So here's how that looks. And now when you come up through the size 10 bead and the super duo bead, but don't come through the 3 10s, just through that first 10 and the super duo. And you'll have to help these first few beads sit in the right spot if you're using, you know, the ball chain as your guide. So they're there. Okay. And what I'm going to do next is come down through this super duo bead. And so the way this is set up is it starts to taper. So remember how we had 1 and 1. Now I'm going to pick up 2 size 10 beads and go behind the ball chain. My tail thread got caught, sorry guys. And the same thing as before. So I went behind the ball chain. I'm going to go over the ball chain now and through both 10s and the super duo bead. And again, I'm guiding it so that it sits in the right spot. And so how this pattern works is under each of the super duo beads, you've got 1 bead, then it goes up to 2 beads, then it tapers up to 3, and then it goes back down so that you get this kind of little wave. And that was just style. You could just do one that's solid, the same height. Anything that you like the look of is great. I was just playing with, you know, giving something of like a scallop to it, and that's why I added extra beads to make it grow like that. But you can do any design you like, of course. So sharing how I did this one with the knowledge that you can do something totally different. It would be even better, great. But this is the same step as before, where we're transitioning to a new bead, picking up 3 tens, going down through a new super duo, and then I'm picking up 2 more size 10 beads, going under the ball chain, and pull tight, and then come up through both of those tens and the super duo bead. And I usually get the thread to, let's stop here, get the thread to be about, a small loop before I start guiding it. To sit right next to the last one. So you see it's starting to take shape. It's starting to look like this other one. I'm gonna go down through that super duo bead. I'm gonna pick up 2 more. No, 3 more, sorry. So we had 2 ones, 2 twos, and now it's time to add 3. Going under the ball chain. Coming back up through all 3 of those tens and the super duo bead. Pulling tight till I have a small loop. And then guiding it to sit in the next spot. And then 3 tens, another super duo bead, and then we'll do 3 more size 10 beads. So that was the 3 tens, super duo, and 3 more. Go behind the ball chain, pull tight, and then come up through all the beads. Okay, and so now I'm going to check the pattern, but I think we have 1 more set of 3 to add. It's kind of handy, but there's 2 sets of 2 and then 3 sets of 3. Going behind the ball chain. There we go. And so that's the whole step. That's the whole way to build the first row. And it's just a series of adding a new bead. And when you add a new bead, you pick up 3 to act as the, I guess, kind of like the space between them. And I've added 3 stacks of 3. So now I'm going to taper back down to 2. This design tapers down in the center and then tapers back up on the other side. But that's all I'm doing, is just changing up the number that sits between the ball chain and the super duo to give it that scallopy kind of wave look. And I'm hoping that makes sense. But it is in the handout. In the sketch, I feel like the sketch helps. For me, the visual of seeing it illustrated with thread paths isolated, that helps me understand it. I think it will help you guys too. Okay, going behind the ball chain, I picked up 2. These are my 2 sets of 2. I went around the front of the ball chain. Here we go. Picking up 3 more size 10 beads, a new super duo. And then for this next one, I'm just going to pick up 1 size 10. See, we tapered up to 3 and back to 2, and now we're tapering right back down to 1. Going through just that 10 and the super duo. I'm going to tighten it down. Guide that loop so it sits in the next gap. And pull tight. Right there, right about there. Okay. And again, I'm turning. Pick up 1 more. Going behind the ball chain. around the front through the bead. Okay, so that's half done. Let me show you what I mean. That's the first half. We've tapered down to this spot where there's one. And one above these guys. So now I'm just going to very quickly build that other half. I'm repeating everything I just did in reverse in this direction. So there's the 3 to space to the next one. And now picking up 2 size 10s, going behind the ball chain. Around the front of the ball chain, through both 10s and through the super duo. And pull tight. And the same thing here, I'm going to need 2 more. Go through the super duo, pick up these 2, behind the ball chain. There we go. And I'm going to go a little fast here because the class is getting down to time. But you know, actually, what I'm thinking is, if you guys can visualize it, I might turn so I can show you adding the bead. What I should do now is complete some more stacks. Should be mirroring these 3, 2, and 2, so that I have a total. This is the center here. And so I should have a total of 5 going this way, but I'm going to make that turn prematurely, and let's just work it this way so I can show you adding. What you do, if let's pretend that this is the last bead over here. Turn around and come up, and we're going to add these little picot edges. Kind of the same as we did with the tiles, same exact process. I'm going to need to turn, so I'm going down through that next hole of the super duo and through the beads below it. It looks like my thread is on top of the ball chain here, so I'm going to come behind it and up through the beads. There we go. And now switch to an 11. I'm still using the Cinnabar Red 11s. And sorry, go through that first 10. So you guys will recognize this is exactly how we did the space between the tiles. Picking up an 11, going through the next 10, pick up another 11, go through the next 10, and then go ahead and continue down through the super duo. That's below it, so just right here. I just went through the super duo. And the cool thing here is we don't have to go around the ball chain anymore. We can use the super duo to turn. So see what I did there? I went under the super duo and then came up through that side. And I'm going to do the same thing again. Pick up another, I went through the 10 and picking up 11. Oops, there we go. Pick up one more 11, go through the next 10. And here's where you add that focal. And I'm going to show you 2 ways. Got 6 minutes. I'm watching. Okay, so we're here in the center. And I'm going to show you the samples again, show you what I'm doing. Here's one where I've added a bead. And here's the one where I added a drop. So starting with the drop. The drops are these, they come in a strand like this. They're on the strung bead wall. You get a lot of them, so you can do some more projects with them too. You only need 1 for this. And what you'll do is just go through, if it will let you go through. Oh, there's a part of the strand in there. Sorry, guys. Let me go with the next one here. Okay. String it right onto your thread and then go through the next 10. I'm going to get these out of the way really quick. And so then what you would do is the same process that we did before. pick up a 10, sorry, pick up an 11 and go through the next 10. So there's how to add the drop. I'm going to back out and show you really quick how to add an 8mm bead. Just in case, you know, you want a different look, or you don't have drops handy, or you just have an 8mm bead that really inspires you that you want to use. Here's how I did this other sample. So the beads that I'm using are, I found these on the bead wall. They're just so pretty. They're like a polymer clay color. On my sample, I chose the white one. I just thought that was really cool. So let me grab any bead here. Let's use the green this time. And these have very large holes. So what you want to do is give yourself a few beads and test it. I put 2 beads on, 2 size 11s in this case. Go through the bead and see where it sits. Pull it tight, push it up against there. And I'm thinking that's probably going to sink into the bead, which is what I wanted it to do. And if it doesn't, go back through and take one off. And I'm thinking I'm going to do that actually. With my last sample, my first 11 sunk into the bead. And this one seems like it's going to actually be perfect, just like that. Okay, yeah, there we go. So just play with it and see. Now I'm picking up 3 size 11 beads. Come up through the 8mm bead. And so there's an option here. If your bead is heavy, now my polymer clay bead is really light. So I could just go straight through my 10s and start adding my next layer of embellishment here. Or if it's a heavy bead and I want to make it secure, I can use my Super Duo as a way to loop around. I'm going to show you that really quick. Like if you wanted to put a gemstone bead here instead of a light bead, you would want to do this step. So I've gone through the Super Duo and I'm going to turn and go through the other side. That's the other hole of Super Duo. Come down through it. And I'll go through that, you know, that 11 we added on top of the bead. Go through it, come down to the bottom of the bead, and then loop around the little picot we created with the 3 11s at the bottom. Come back up through it, come back up through that 11 that's on the top of the bead. And now continue on into the next side here. Going through just that first 10. Pick up 1 11. Go through the next 10. Do that one more time with another 11. Do the next 10. Okay, and then I would do that same step we had before. Come down through the Super Duo. Use it to turn by going that way through it. And on to the next step for embellishing. And that is the super duper abbreviated version of how to make.
Hey, Danielle, it's Carmi.
Hey.
Hey, you're doing great for time. And in the history of beading classes, I've never seen anybody teach 3 designs in the same class very, very quickly. Some people have never seen ball chain. So would you mind showing them the component at the end that actually closes the ball chain and turns it into a necklace?
Yeah, let me switch back really quick. And so it comes on these little cards. I'm gonna let my camera come back into focus there. Sorry guys. Okay. The end of the ball chain has one of these little, I don't really know what to call it. They kind of just look like a tube, but one side is open. And you can get the ball chain out by pushing this way. It should snap right out. handy for getting it off the card as well. That's what I was doing earlier when I was fussing with, I had a tight one. But then to lock them, go. I put the ball of the ball chain through that open part of the tube and then just push it down. Or like kind of turning it down.
That's great. Thank you, Danielle. They understand now.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, I think you have 30 seconds. Maybe you'd like to show the final class of the year.
Yes. Yeah. Let me grab those. So more brick stitch next week, but with some new fun stuff, new fun spins on just all the possibilities with brick stitch. I really went through like my whole library of brick stitch knowledge for this one. So I'm gonna have a lot of fun. That little end embellishment is a very handy trick for lots of different kinds of jewelry. So that's one you want to definitely tune into. We're going to do a little bit of wire work as well. See these little guys at the top. I made those with 22 gauge German style wire. Yeah. All right, so we made it for right at 1 minute over. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and I'd love to see you back next week on Tuesday. All right, have a good night, everybody. Bye.